Hello, my pleasure seekers, and welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to have the wonderful Chris Hill on today's show. And I know a lot of you have been requesting to hear a man's perspective on the world of dating. And this guy is probably no pressure, Chris, but is going to give some amazing insights into how he has become where he is now in the dating world and helping men all over the world to find their wife, in his words, not mine. But Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself properly and we'll take it from there. Thank you for joining me today.
Awesome, Lucy. I'm super excited to just connect with somebody who understands the importance of a man's voice, especially now. So, like I mentioned earlier, I have been helping men for the last 15 years. I had a TV show here in the States, right out of university, where I help men basically just be better at being a man and understanding what it meant to be a young man in a professional environment. And over the last 8 years, I've transformed that business into a very successful, over 3,000 gentlemen across the globe, help them find or understand the steps that it takes to find a woman who they believe and understand is wife material.
Okay. Wow. Hang on. Wait. So I read about your TV show, but I really wanted to ask you first, how do you go from college to then having a TV show to start off with? That's a big step.
Yeah, sure, yeah. It wasn't. It was kind of by accident. I had a friend who was in the entertainment industry, and they needed a pilot to shoot. And at this time, reality TV was just hot on the scene. And I pitched the idea of a show called Help the Other Guy, where it was a man's take on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, but it was straight guy for the straight guy. And ultimately, the goal was to identify men, take my perspective of what it meant to be a young man in his early 20s, successful, to reinvent themselves, other men, to equally be as successful, not only professionally, but personally in terms of the relationship. I've been fortunate enough to always understand the importance of relationship in my life. My mom was a great influence. My parents were a great influence. My father showed me what it meant to be a gentleman at a very early age. And I was able to embody those characteristics my entire life. So when I was out of university and I was fortunate enough to land a really successful job in the entertainment business and start this TV show, I wanted to share my thoughts on what it meant to be a gentleman. And the TV got picked up by the Warner Brother Network. We did 13 episodes, and I basically went around and communicated and talked to other gentlemen that were around the same age at different universities who struggled with relationships, with health and fitness, with just life type questions. And I would answer those questions specifically, and we would bring in professionals that knew exactly how to tackle those issues. I'm definitely not an expert of everything, but I can definitely bring an expert to you that can answer your particular questions where a lot of guys don't know where to look. And that's how this whole process got started. I'm definitely not the best or out of anything, but I feel that I can at least acknowledge where things need to improve, and I can bring you the people that can help you improve.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned obviously you had a great childhood, and that's kind of where your stem for like relationships obviously naturally came from. But what was it for you that was the passion in helping men then, particularly around your age group, that you wanted to get involved in?
I think when you have friends who are desperately struggling with one area of their life, it's easy for you to step in and say, hey, let's try to address this thing. And time again, over the last 15 years, the only issue that men, I guess, felt comfortable enough to come to me to was relationship. Professionally, they know they can go look at videos or read books, go to seminars. If it's health and fitness, they can do the same. There's enough information out there for those men to find an answer. But when it comes to the nuance or the art or the how to interact with women and understand that it's multidimensional, and it's not singular, it's not one answer, it's not just five things or three things like we see online. It's a constant learning curve of trying to appreciate the partner that you're with, and knowing that just because things are good now does not mean that they're going to stay good forever, and you have to grow with that person and understand it and read the cues that they're giving you. It's a multidimensional relationship, right? Being with a partner for long term is not easy, and it shouldn't be, because you have two different people that are living their life, and if you don't acknowledge the direction that they're going, you'll never be with them forever. And at an early age, I saw my parents navigate those tests of a relationship, whether it was bankruptcy, um, infidelity, or sickness and illness. I saw the importance of understanding your partner. And I also understand the importance of dealing with those traumas, and how you staying with your partner ultimately provides you with a much more satisfying, loving life than if you would have said, you know what, you lied to me about your credit card bills, or you lied to me about where you were. I'm over it. And then you left. And then now what? Right? A lot of men look at relationships in a very short-sighted perspective, where they allow their egos to get the best of them, and they're making poor decisions that are leading to a life of unhappiness. And when I saw how my friends would truly be devastated in a relationship, but I could see why, and I could see that it wasn't just her, it was both of them. That's when I said, okay, I think I can step up and help my friends. And that was something that I always felt I needed to do, because you just want to see your friends happy. And that's how it started.
Wow. And then have you always found it's come natural for you to do well in your own relationships as well?
No, of course not. Right. I don't think, like in anything,
Mm.
the only way for it to come natural is if you keep working at it. Right. If you keep growing and keep understanding the involvement, evolution of relationship. My wife and I met, it was a tumultuous time for both of us. She was, newly separated. She had a 12-year-old daughter. She lived in Vancouver, Canada. I lived in California, newly separated from my partner. And I just found out that I was going to become a dad with a person that I barely even knew.
Mm.
And although for the previous 8 years, I was a successful, relationship coach, I found myself in a whole new environment that I wasn't familiar with. So, of course, I'm always learning. And even to this day, fast forward 8 years, my wife and I have two boys. We have two girls from previous relationships. We have a blended family. We have businesses. But my wife's getting older and I'm getting older. And I have to understand, what is it like to be in a relationship with a woman who is approaching 40? How does a woman's hormones impact her emotions and her responses to me? And I can't just push it off as it's not my problem. It's more my problem than it is her problem, because I'm in control of my response. So
Mm.
I'm always picking up books on trying to understand. And I tell my clients all the time. I had a client yesterday. He spent $58,000 on professional development, but all he talks about is how he can't understand why his ex-wife acts a certain way. I go, how many books have you read about handling ex-wives? Zero. Why not? You talk more about your stresses with your ex-wife than you do with about your successful business. Why don't we spend a little bit of time and energy and money reinvesting and understanding probably the biggest pain that you have, because you already run a successful business. I understand that you want to reinvest, and that's fine, but let's divert a little bit of that attention and energy back into understanding your emotional response to somebody who you've spent a long time with. And a lot of guys are almost like blindsided by that advice. They think, oh, I should read about divorce. I should read about handling separation. I said, well, how often are you thinking about it? I think about it all the time. Well, then let's try to figure things out. That's where I come in and I help them understand, like a business coach or a fitness coach. Okay, here's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to read this book. We're going to take this test. We're going to do this. And yeah, it's a journey for all of us.
And then do you find there are any kind of common themes? I don't like to use the word common, but like scenarios that you come up against a lot. You mentioned obviously around divorced and successful businessmen traditionally. Like, is there any other common ground that you're finding at the moment that you see in your clients?
Bitterness,
Oh, okay.
very bitter. Um,
Why is that?
Resentment.
Uh-huh.
I think it's easy to be bitter and resentful of a situation after the fact, but during the fights and the arguments, it's harder to see the other person's perspective. And when you're on the other side of a divorce or separation or heartbreak, it's easy to be resentful, opposed to acknowledging the signs that you could have, recognized early on in the relationship, whether it's a infidelity, right? A lot of guys will experience infidelity and their immediate reaction is, I'm resentful, I hate this person, opposed to saying, well, how did she get to the point of infidelity, right? Because there is a point when you decided as a logical man that this person was going to be your person. Where did you lose sight of that person being your person? Let's go back there. Let's see how you were handling situations and then how she responded. Because each action receives an equal or greater reaction, right?
Totally.
So right now, a lot of men are fighting to understand to understand where things went wrong and accepting that they played a bigger part in where things went wrong than they initially wanted to believe.
How do you help men accept that? Because yeah, if I look at some of my friendships and I'm single at the moment, and even guys, on dates that I go on, and when they bring up the ex, it's always interesting to hear, their language around it and their experience. How do you help men with the resentment? Because that and the bitterness, that's a really strong emotion to look at for anyone, right?
Yeah, I think you have to disassociate the repercussions of that situation. And if you disassociate yourself, what I mean by that is, let's say that I was cheated on 7 years ago, and today I'm very bitter and I still hold on resentment to my ex because she cheated. So I don't really look at the ex as an emotional connection between you and her. I disassociate it. It's okay. Like, what was going on in your life? Like, let's just talk about who you were. Like, let's just talk about you as an individual. Forget what happened. Like, what was going on in your life? And they tell me I was starting my business. Things were going great. I was taking my wife's on trips. I always love, and this is like a common response, I was buying my wife everything. Like every man at that time in the divorce or except infidelity is like, they don't understand. Oh, I was buying her everything. We were going on trips. Okay, well, maybe that's 20% of a relationship, showing your love via gifts, right? If you know the book Love Languages, that's a part of accepting love is gift giving. What was your communication like? What was your affection like? What was your r- receiving of her like? And
Mm.
almost always during that time, when men are building their businesses, they feel so in charge and so forceful that they're giving effort to business, they're giving things to partners, but they're not receiving any of the emotion, or seeing any of their partner, listening to any of the person's nonverbal cues. And that's when they start to understand, okay, wait a minute, kind of right. I kind of did notice, but I didn't think, or I saw this, but it wasn't a big deal. Because in your mind, which is rightfully so in a lot of ways, and I understand, they put business ahead of relationship. But it takes a long time for men to really see that that is the reason. And although they think they can justify it by saying, I was doing it for her, is another thing you hear. Oh, I was doing it for the family. I was doing it for her. Well, if you were doing it for her, you'd have taken a moment to see if that's really what she wanted.
Mm. Yeah. And then how do you work with someone that's on the opposite side where they've done the infidelity as well? Like with them trusting them, learning to trust themselves again as well.
When it comes to a man's infidelity, it's accepting the fact that they made a decision in a relationship for the wrong reasons. And that's where it's a similar process. You understand what you were looking for at that time and what you needed at that time. And if that coincided with what need you were feeling. So let's say you're a successful man and you are constantly cheating on your partner. Like, what's going on with you that you felt the need? And a lot of times they're feeling lonely, right? And maybe because they are building a business and they feel like their wife isn't um, hearing them in a professional sense. So they'll cheat with a woman on a business trip, or another associate who they find attractive, and they kind of connect on that level. Well, then really what it boils down to is us going back before you met your wife and understanding, did you really meet your wife or your partner for the right reasons? And then did you communicate really what you needed? Because a lot of women, they are willing to adapt if they know what they're adapting to, just like a lot of men who aren't listening. So we're adaptable in relationships, but we can only be adaptable when we know what to adapt to. And a lot of men will make the decision to cheat internally without ever sharing any thought to their partner of their feelings of feeling unsatisfied. So when they say, "Oh, I've been a serial cheater," it's like, "Why did you cheat?" "Well, my partner wasn't doing this." "Well, did you ask your wife to do that?"
Certainly, yeah.
And even if they did, and this is like a lot of guys will say, "Oh yeah, I told my wife to be sexier." Like, okay, like that's fine.
Yeah,
But
cool.
like, but like now, so that's a great question. So now what do you do if you told your wife something, and then I'm sure she said back to you, and you should know, what does your wife need to hear from you to to want to be sexier for you, right? It doesn't just stop with you telling her something, right?
Yes.
If you say, "Oh, I want you to do this," okay, that's great. But how is she going to respond? How is she going to really truly give you what you want if you're not in a constant? And that's why, regardless of your where you're at in a relationship, it's 50-50. It's got to be, I'll give you a little, you give me a little. And if you don't do that, then one person's bulldozing the relationship, and the other person is having to receive everything. And then that's when the imbalance happens. And one person's going to do something that's out of character. And that's when the relationship falls apart.
But how do you manage to help someone that's they think they're in the 50-50, but they're not, and they're heading more into the other side, because sometimes when you're in a relationship, you don't even notice this happening, right? Until your examples of like infidelity or spending all your money on your wife and it not being what she needs. Like, is there any tips that you have for people to stop and reflect and be like, shit, like it's going one way right now?
It's all about micro decisions, right? It's about, okay, what are we doing? Like, let's for example, I proposed a question to my group on, when we find our dream partner, what are we going to do? What are
Wow.
you going to do with your wife or your partner? And it's interesting. 50% of them said, we're going to do this. The other 50% said, whatever she wants, right? So that's a great example of someone who would possibly cheat or someone who might be cheated on. When you don't at least acknowledge each decision as a equal conversation, then it's easy for you to fall into the path of being overly dominant or overly submissive. And I think that is the kind of the break in the road where you make the decision. Okay, so for like your question, then we start talking about, okay, when you go out to dinner, are you listening? Are you making the decision based on exactly where she wants to go? Or are you reading her nonverbal cues and seems to be agreeing just with what you're saying because she knows that's what you want, right? Can you at least see that she's saying she wants to go to the pub because she knows that's where you want to go to the pub and watch the game, right? Or is she saying, okay, I want to go here, and she doesn't listen to you, right? So you have to pick up on that, and as soon as you pick up on a micro habit, and you have to acknowledge it, and if you acknowledge it at that small stage, and you kind of set the tone of the discussion, say, hey, listen, I want to go here. What do you think about that? And then now, and not make it a fight, right? Just like make it an acknowledgement, and you acknowledge small decisions that are being made that could possibly snowball into larger repercussions.
But I think sometimes with social media, and we spoke about this earlier before I press record, where there's like this culture where it's like women should learn to receive, feel safe in their bodies, and then it's kind of producing this feeling for a man to take control, have the dominance. You're not a man unless you're the dominant one, that books the dinner, that sorts everything out for the woman, and equally the
It's
woman.
silly.
It's so silly, right?
It's silly.
Oh, drives me insane.
Yeah, it's like we have a term in the States called like virtue signaling.
Virtual
Of
signal, okay.
Yeah, you're signaling your virtues, right? Like you're doing everything you can to let everybody know how masculine you are or how dominant you are. So it's not, again, it's not uncommon because social media is pushing everyone to act a certain way. But when social media is off and you're speaking to someone and they're acting this way, oh, don't worry, I took care of it. I'm doing this, or we're doing this. When you're at dinner and when both people are vulnerable, because no matter if you're Andrew Tate or if you're the weakest, most beta man, there's a point when everybody comes to a stillness in a relationship or a conversation, and you truly should be interacting, not dominating or talking at somebody. There should be a point where you're communicating, truly communicating back and forth. And that's when you acknowledge the behavior, because there's posturing on both ends. And there are women that will say, I will only date a man who does X, right? I will only date a man who makes X amount of money, who does this. But as a man who works with men who make millions of dollars, who can take you to any place in the world at a moment, that's not how men want to be communicated with, right? So when you acknowledge that at a point when there's no posturing or no cameras or no friends around, that's truly when you can decide whether or not that person is for you. Because we're not all compatible. And if you don't acknowledge that some people are kind of wired that way and some people aren't, and you can really only do that when the tension's down, the communication is strong, we're having this two-way dialogue about whatever we're talking about, and then you bring up your concern or your thoughts. And if they don't acknowledge them as genuine concerns and thoughts, and they don't validate the fact that you might be feeling that way, then okay, no hard feelings. I'm not going to force you to feel away because you look away. And that's what a lot of guys are doing that I work with. They force a relationship because they feel like, okay, they check these boxes, they should check the rest. So they will pretend to be more masculine or more submissive, whatever that woman needs, to fulfill the other person's needs. And again, sometimes those needs are just signals, right? They're just their ego, their posturing, and sometimes they're genuine. But you truly have to understand whether this person's truly that way or if they're just posturing. And you can only do that when you're both engaged in an authentic conversation.
And then how can you say when guys make this, they have the check boxes, and women do, of course, it works both ways, right? But when, say, someone is they're dating someone, and they're like, yeah, he or she ticks 50%, and they're like, right, ready, off I go. What does it take for you to suggest that they slow down and actually be like, look, if someone doesn't tick on my boxes, I mean, also I want to say, having a checklist I don't necessarily agree with myself. Like, I understand values are super important, but I think like by having a checklist, in my experience, kind of excludes some people that could be amazing, right? Do you ever have that conversation with men around encouraging them to have a checklist? I'm going off on a tangent here.
No. You're 100% right,
Yeah.
because I get that pushback all the time. So the way that I help my clients understand, and I hope maybe this helps you understand why I have them create a checklist, is because I have them envision a building, right? A long, skinny tower. Okay. At the base of your tower are your beliefs, your values, your goals.
Sorry,
I know he's excited.
it's fine. She's excited. We're talking about men. She's a female rescue dog. She's like,
uh,
woohoo. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, no. And so yeah, I envision it as like a long skinny tower, and I go, listen, guys, like your the base of your pyramid or the base of your tower or your building is your beliefs, your values, your purpose, your goals, right? And your timeline, or your like where you want to be, right? So at the base of of your building are the most important things in your life, right? Spirituality, family, goals, career, kids, no kids, everything that you start like are basically your non-negotiables, right? Build the foundation of your building. And then things that go above that are less and less important. Let's say this person smokes. Okay, let's say this person drinks. Let's say this person dresses a way that you don't find attractive. Let's say your taste in music, it doesn't align with your taste, and these things annoy you, right? Let's say, because my wife and I don't have the same taste in music, she thinks that some of the things I do are very annoying, and vice versa. But in terms of the importance of our foundation and our building is built on a very strong foundation. The beliefs, the values, the spirituality, the purpose, the goals align 100%, no variation, right? But as I was telling you before, as a man who came off of a divorce with a newborn and meeting a woman who's 7 years older than I am, who also had a child, who lived in a different country, who listened to different music, who was Asian. I've never even dated an Asian before. I had no idea what that even was going to look like in terms of our family and how that was going to transcend the current situation that we were in. Not that ethnicity is important, but it's at least noting that if you date someone out of your ethnicity that you've never dated before, You don't know what their traditions are like, right? And that might play a factor in your beliefs and values, right? If Christmas is very important to my family and my beliefs and my values, does she celebrate it the same way that I do? And is family the same importance to her as it is for me? Education, things like that. But once we realize that early on in our relationship that we had the same core beliefs, the values, the purpose, the goals, and it was a checklist. It was okay, a mental checklist. It was the same type of checklist that you go when you're making a decision for food. Okay, am I going to get the ice cream or am I going to get the salad? You're not logically going through, okay, this has much protein, calories, carbs, fats, etc. Just go, okay, this kind of aligns with what I want. And then now that you have this rough estimate of, okay, this person aligns with who you are, then you start working yourself up the ladder. And if something like location, that could be a big deal. But for us, we've had such a core foundation that the location was here. And if that location was not, proximity was not there, that doesn't affect the structural integrity of our building. Our building is still rock solid. Things like that can come and go, and it's not going to affect us. So a lot of men are making decisions based on things like location, how attractive you are to that person. But when they come to the foundation, values, beliefs, purpose, goals, when those aren't satisfied or at least acknowledged, and anything comes to blow into their building, the whole structure's lost. So you have to understand what's important to you. And the only way to do that is you have to truly like look inside and make not a literal checklist, but a mental understanding of what's important.
And do you find a lot of people that you work with know their own values? Because that's quite an intimidating thing to question to start off with, right?
I think values, if you're being honest, are
Mm.
easy, right? And you might not know the entirety of what your values are, but when you look into your past and your family, a lot of values come in from their upbringing, and it's like easy to kind of connect those dots. So we don't necessarily talk about your values, we talk about your past. And then as a team, the client and I will go through and I'll kind of jot things down that I think are important. And then afterwards we'll go say, hey, do you feel that these are some of the most important things in your life? Yes. Okay. They typically align. And it's not a complete list. It's not a list that doesn't change. And that's why we always work on relationships, because my foundation might shift a little bit, and just like my wife's, maybe work becomes more important because of something. But at least we acknowledge, we have that communication, right? That's why the constant dialogue is important. But at least we know the blueprint, right? We've identified the blueprint prior to marriage that, okay, we feel the same way about these things. There will be wind, there will be other things that come in and try to break the foundation, not for any other reason than that's how life is, right? And as long as we acknowledge, hey, there's a storm coming, you're going to have to leave for work a lot more, that might stress our foundation of our relationship. Okay, let's acknowledge it and prepare for it and discuss how we're going to handle, and how, if it's really bad, this is what we do. If it's really easy, we do this, right? Just like anything, you prepare for a storm more than you prepare for a change in your relationship. The repercussions of a divorce are way more than the repercussions of a storm in your house.
Totally, that's such a good point. Yeah. And then do you find that when you're working with clients as well, where at what point do you have that blueprint conversation, right? Was that early days for you in your relationship? Because I can imagine some of my listeners might be listening right now thinking, shit, a couple of years into the marriage or relationship, haven't had the blueprint conversation, you know?
I think, so, like we said with the ice cream salad example, some of the blueprint is almost assumed,
Yeah.
right? You've seen enough of that person where you have an idea if their blueprint matches your blueprint. But I don't think the blueprint and the foundation are the only conversations that you need to have, because although location Like my wife and I, she lived in a different country than I did, and it was a 3.5 hour flight every 2 weeks. And I saw her every so often, and she was technically still married. And I just found out that I was a father from a friend that I hooked up with. There was a lot of potential jealousy that could have been fostered from that situation. She lived next door to her ex-husband that she was with for 15 years. I saw my ex every 2 weeks to see my daughter that we just had together, right? We just met. So we had to acknowledge those sort of that we had to acknowledge that that was important for us as a blue from a blueprint perspective. So, but we didn't talk about like, okay, beliefs, values, all that stuff right up front. It was just, do we trust each other? Yes. Okay, now let's talk about other things that are important to us. And then it can kind of create momentum. So if you're 2 years in a relationship and you haven't spoke about truly everything, and that's okay. But I think it's good to at least acknowledge that those other things exist. And if any of those things start to become a concern for you, acknowledge them, discuss them before they get into a problem that you can't correct.
And what do you suggest for anyone that's listening right now that's like, oh my gosh, I totally resonate with Chris. I just don't know where to start. Because this can be seen as quite an intimidating thing to step up and A, ask for help, and B, like approach someone like yourself, you know?
Uh, okay, so what do you mean? So you're saying like if someone feels like they need to improve their relationship or improve like getting into a relationship? What do you mean?
It can be either or, but say there's a guy that's listening right now and he's thinking, I didn't even know someone like yourself existed, right? Um,
like me?
yeah, like you, and
Okay, okay.
and the services that you offer and the coaching, which we haven't really actually we've touched on, but not to a certain extent, around like taking a step to look at their lives and make the first step with improving, say, their relationship right now.
You know what? That's the
Yeah.
hardest thing. I think for anyone that's trying to find a partner, it truly has to feel organic, like weight loss. And it's not easy. Weight loss is an easy program to sign up for. They give you an exercise routine, they give you a diet plan, and you follow it, you lose weight, and that's it. It's really checking the boxes. So when someone's even considering working with me, or I'm considering working with them, they truly have to understand the importance of love, the importance of relationship, the want and benefits of a partner. Because when my wife and I got together, we were both successful in our own careers, and there was no want. It was, or no, there was no need. There was the want, right? We didn't need to be together. We wanted to be together. We made that choice. And when you want something very badly and you see the benefits of that relationship, you're willing to do whatever it takes. So if you're someone who is okay being single, if you're okay with um, lonely nights and the depression that comes along with being divorced or a single parent, and if you're dealing with life that way, then you're not ready, right? The people that I work with truly see the value in love, and they truly see the value in being a parent with a partner. It doesn't have to be the mother of your child, but you see the value in a cohesive family. And it's really 50-50. Like I said initially, I haven't advertised my services because for the longest time, men that I work with are a select few. They're very exclusive. They really understand the importance. They want something so badly that they're willing to hire somebody to help them get it. And for a lot of men, and probably for a lot of women, love is something that they think that they will just happen, and they just kind of it's magic. It's not magic. Just like being in great shape is not magic. It is not genetics. It is not your product of your environment. It's something that you have to work towards. And there are only few men. Luckily, I've helped a lot, but for doing this for this long, I would think there'd be more men uh, that would at least have acknowledged the importance of love. But I think that's a sign of the times. I don't think they're not really chasing love; they're chasing status and value socially, opposed to genuine love that they can feel. And I think you have to be in a certain place to actually pursue that.
And it's getting to that place, right?
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, you're still single
Yeah, definitely. Out of choice for sure.
from a
Yeah,
choice, right?
definitely. Yeah. Like I think
Yeah.
I find it quite funny actually. From what this is one of my things, but like being my own independent, like successful woman, like knowing that a big thing for me is to be with a man that is totally fine with that, because I've had past and I've, worked through that, where like I've dated guys that haven't liked my success and my drive, and there's been like inferior side of things. So that's a big thing for me, to like feel firstly comfortable dating a successful person that is supportive of my own success as well as theirs. And going back to your point you made earlier, which I loved, and I was going to say, when a guy puts on a persona they think they should be for you, I find I've attracted quite a few men like that, and I find that so unattractive. But obviously that's a mirror and something I'm doing too, right? There's probably an area where I may have not come across authentic on those certain dates. So yeah.
You know, being single is okay. Like
Okay.
that's yeah, it's fine. I don't think that, again, from my experience, you can accomplish so much more with a person who's running the same race that you are.
Totally, yeah.
When I met my wife, both of our businesses were at a certain level of success. But now I have this co-pilot who's allowing me to drive as fast as I can and giving me the instructions to go even faster, because she's supporting every decision I've made and in real time, just like her. If my wife's business would not have grown as rapidly as it has, if she wasn't able to 100% focus on the growth of that business, well, I helped take care of the family when she was not here. My wife still to this day will leave for 2 weeks out of the month every single month to travel for work. And I'm 100% committed. There's no complaining. I just absolutely take care of the family when she's gone. And the reason for that is because she knows that when I'm committed to my craft and I'm traveling for work, there is no question, there is no resentment. She is 100% by my side, so I can drive as fast as I can to success. And for you, being someone who's driven and who's trying to be as successful as possible, you're doing yourself a disservice by not finding someone who can take some of the responsibility off your plate. We all are strong, independent people. That's Most people are that way, but it's the ego that comes along with success that prohibits us from reaching higher levels. And imagine what Lucy could do if she found a man who said, Lucy, I'm doing this, I'm paying rent for the next month. I want you to take that rent check and I want you to invest it back into your business, put it in marketing. I want you to put that to this. How much more could you grow? And that's what my wife and I have done. I need to do this for marketing. Okay, sweetheart, here's a check. Let's go. Hey, sweetheart, I need to spend 2 weeks on the road traveling to see clients that are struggling across the globe. Okay, go to Australia, go to New Zealand, meet me with your clients. I'm going to hold the fort down here. Our businesses have grown exponentially because of the support of each other.
I love that. It's so refreshing to hear. Like, I cannot agree with you more about the ego. Of course, like it's also drilled in. And I think for me, and I'm very blessed, I've been raised by like two parents together. But my mum was the breadwinner and I'm the firstborn daughter. So I am working.
Mhm.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it's like the independent woman, do everything yourself, which I don't like. But still to this day, it's really fun because sometimes my mom's like, never trust a man with your finances and all this stuff. And I'm like, Cool.
It's like such a singular response to a like dimensional question. Like, would never trust any man. Warren Buffett's pretty good with finances. I would trust Warren Buffett with my,
I
like
love
never
Warren
trust a
Buffett with my
woman. Yeah,
finances.
like a lot of my clients will say, I will never trust another woman. Mother Teresa was a pretty good woman. I think you probably could trust her. Like you don't look at every future action based on singular past interactions. Most men have only been married once, twice, maybe three times, and they're making every decision based on these three bad examples.
Yeah.
You make millions of decisions per day, and you made three bad decisions, or you didn't truly comprehend the impact of your decisions that would impact their decisions, and it snowballed into a divorce. But that does not mean that Lucy or anybody else should not pursue a relationship and understand that that's going to be complicated. There's going to be stress involved. And I'm not suggesting everybody needs to get married or everybody needs to have a wife or husband, but there is no every successful athlete has a team. Every successful business person has a group that they advise in. And for most of us, your partner is your number one supporter, advisor, cheerleader. And if I didn't have my wife and my wife didn't have me, then who, we wouldn't be as successful as we are today. There's no doubt about that.
Did you establish that quite early doors when you met each other? Like, were you successful? I don't really like this word successful is quite a broad term, but like, were your businesses in a successful place when you both met each other? You mentioned your lives were both going, you had so many different challenges happening at the time you met, but
So like before I met my wife, I reached a certain level of financial success, but it wasn't consistent because I was making poor decisions, right? I was being told things that weren't going to be the best for me, and I followed that guidance blindly. So there was inconsistency in my success. I made a lot of money, but my relationships weren't very stable. My friendships with people were not very um, weren't very strong, and my wife was reaching levels of success, but she felt capped by her responsibilities as a mother at that time. Right when I met my wife, she had a 12-year-old daughter, and I was so there. What we did reach success. We were making a lot of money in retrospect, but in terms of like breaking the ceiling of being, oh, we're like doing well, to now doing very well financially and very well. My wife and I yesterday took the day off. We went to the beach. We played tennis. We hung out all day. I had a few appointments. She had a few appointments. But in the interim, we're having fun. We're playing. We're two kids playing all day, playing on the beach. We're playing in the sand. We're playing in the water. Coming home. We're playing tennis for an hour. And then we pick up our kids. We come home. We play with them. We take them for a bike ride. Like that's the day we're able to do those things because of each other. So if we didn't have each other and I had more money, yeah, maybe I'd have more cars or more watches, but my my success financially, my success personally, emotionally, spiritually would not be at the level if they are today. Maybe one of those pillars is higher than the rest, but from what I've seen and what my wife has experienced, our overall level of happiness across all of our needs as humans has never been this high. Obviously, not without fights and arguments and crying and this, but spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, it only could be this way if you have a partner to kind of help you where you lack. I wasn't the best at this, but now my wife helps me with that. And she wasn't the best at that. And I help her. There is no massive success without help.
yeah.
The reality.
I feel like that's like drum roll. No success without help.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I could chat to you for hours. I'm conscious we've kind of overrun on time, but for anyone that's looking to like hear more about you, where can they find you?
You can see a version of me on Instagram at dating coach Chris, and then you DM me, schedule a call with me, ask me a question. Like I said, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I've been around long enough. I've spoken to enough men that I have some really good insight. And if anything else, we can point you in a direction where you can get the answers that you need and deserve, because I truly believe that life is better with love.
I love that. Oh my God, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really, really appreciate it. I'll put everything in the show notes for anyone listening. And on that note, life is everything if you've got love.
Yeah, life is better with love.
Life
Absolutely.
is better with love. There you go. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today. I really, really, really appreciate it.
It's
And
been a pleasure.
you. Oh, it's been an honor to have you. So thank you.
Thanks, Lucy.